Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/audio.
Over the past 75 years, more than 10,000 chemicals have entered our food supply, but the EU allows just 300 additives. At Thrive Market, we prioritize quality, banning over 1,000 ingredients found in conventional grocery stores. Our Healthy Swap scanner helps you find better versions of your pantry essentials without the junk, dyes, or fillers, and everything is delivered right to your doorstep. So shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health at thrivemarket.com/get started for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
American Freedom Radio.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by none other than pscoco.com, Phoebe Sod's chocolate website. Go to pscoco.com, pscocoa.com, and you get all kinds of silky smooth chocolates, cake mixes, brownie mixes, martini mixes, sauces, all kinds of wonderful stuff there at pscoco.com. And not only that, too, but you can also go into the cocoa business with Phoebe Sod. You can become like her partner, her independent distributor, and you could all be selling this the Chocolate Exchange, formerly Dove Chocolate Discoveries, but now known as the Chocolate Exchange. So you go to pscoco.com, and then you click on the Shop Now button, and it'll take you to the wonderful site with all their menus and all their wonderful chocolates and all kinds of stuff like that. Also, don't forget emailrevealer.com. That's where you can get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. I'll autograph the book for you, and I'll mail it to you, ultimately. And then also all kind of services we have for you on there. You want to catch your spouse cheating online, you give us their email address. We trace it back to online dating websites and catch them in the act. Okay. We got today a fascinating guy. He came recommended to us by our buddy over there, a custodian of records. Shout out to my buddy over there. He said, Ed's always been talking about doing a show about Ricky Kasso, the Acid King. And we have Jesse P. Pollack, who wrote the book, The Acid King. I don't think the book is even out yet, but it's on the way out. And he's also the author of another book called Death on the Devil's Teeth, The Strange Murder That Shocked Suburban New Jersey. Great stuff. This is kind of our stuff. People love this kind of stuff. So we have Jesse Pollack on the show. Jesse, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I hear you really good, yeah.
Awesome. Great. That means that this little Samsung microphone I got is getting me my money's worth. Glad to hear it.
Oh, yeah. I can hear a pin drop over there.
Awesome.
so hang on to that pin.
I'll be sure not to drop that pin.
Not again, please.
Too many pins.
Hurting my ears. Jesse, tell us about yourself, Jesse. Who is Jesse Pollack? What do we need to know about you?
You're the investigator, though. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, where to start, especially coming up with this weird stuff. Yeah. I was born and raised in the Garden State of New Jersey, and for the last 2 decades now, I have been a contributing writer and a correspondent for Weird New Jersey magazine. And even if you do not live in New Jersey or the surrounding area, I cannot highly recommend this magazine enough. Everything from true crime, personalized property, strange history, UFO sightings, cryptozoology. If you're into weird stuff, Weird New Jersey is where it's at. You can get it online. Each issue is about $7, including shipping. And if you live in New Jersey, I think it's pretty much everywhere books are sold. Barnes & Noble has it, Books A Million. Shout out to Vintage Vinyl and Ford's. So, I kind of got my start writing by doing these little articles for the magazine, which I I just loved as a reader. And then a few years back, I kind of went down the rabbit hole with a case that Weird New Jersey started reporting on in the late 90s. Somewhere around 1998, the magazine's editors, Mark Moran and Mark Skirman, started getting a series of bizarre anonymous letters. They had recently reported on a patch of woods in central New Jersey known as the Watchung Reservation. And not to sound like too much out of a horror movie or anything, but the Watchung Reservation is a patch of sacred Indian land that is now sort of like a state park, and it's just rife with accounts of ghosts, devil worshippers. There was a very famous suicide that happened there in 1975. So Weird New Jersey started reporting on it, and then all these letters started coming in saying like, oh, yeah, you know, you're just scratching the surface. I remember when I was a kid in the 70s, there was a girl who was found dead like a mile or two away, and she was a ritual satanic sacrifice or a witch coven got her. It was always one or the other. So at first, the Marks kind of thought it was a bit of an urban legend, like, oh, girl found dead in the woods, Satanists did it. I think every kind of suburban town has a urban legend like that. But then they were publishing these anonymous letters in the Weird Mail section of the magazine. And then more and more started coming in saying, oh, I remember that too. Her name was Jeanette De Palma, and she was found on an altar. So now the Marks had a name. So they started going back in the newspaper archives, and they eventually found out that, yes, this was a thing. In September 1972, this girl's body was found in a rock quarry. And she was only found because a dog brought home a piece of her arm. So an incredibly eerie start to an already strange case. And long story short, they were never able to find out how she died, who killed her. The best they can figure is she was strangled. And the reports coming from the crime scene at the time were that she was found surrounded by quote-unquote occult objects. So, of course, this is the proto-satanic panic. And the rumor mill went wild. It was front page news for 2 weeks in the New Jersey, New York area. And then with no leads coming up, it just died out. So fast forward 30, 40 years later with Weird New Jersey reporting on it, I said to Mark Moran, I said, hey, have you heard any developments on this since you guys started reporting on it years ago? And he goes, no, we haven't really heard anything. And me, I'm a voracious reader of true crime and history, and it was kind of almost a disappointment to me on a personal level, because I was like, I would really love to know more about this case. I'd love to read a good book about this case, and if no one's written one, I guess we should do it. So Mark and I teamed up, and for 3 years, we hunted down every lead we could, every anonymous piece of mail, every microfilm roll, anything we could get to try and give an answer to this very strange murder. And I think we've come very, very close to it. And the result of that investigation is the book that we released in 2015 called Death on the Devil's Teeth.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I looked up Jeanette De Palma, it most of the story here talks about Weird New Jersey magazine and stuff like that in your book. So I guess you guys were a real catalyst here in getting this story back into the news.
It was a weird thing. Unlike the Kasso case, which, as you and maybe some of your listeners know, was worldwide news for weeks. I mean, that was really a big bang of the satanic panic that we all knew in the 80s and the 90s. The De Palma case, like I said, was about front page news for 2 weeks and then just died out. No one wanted to talk about it anymore. The cops wouldn't report on it. The newspapers had nothing. The family stopped giving interviews. And if you talk to anyone in Springfield, New Jersey, where this occurred, I don't want to talk about that. No, we need let it lie. And so When we first started it, yeah, if you Googled her name, the only thing that would come up was the word New Jersey page for it. So we literally had to start from scratch. I mean, it's funny in this digital era, everyone is just like, oh yeah, I'll Google it, or I'll find something on Ancestry.com or some newspaper thing. But we had to go literally back to analog, going to these dusty shelves in libraries all across New Jersey, grabbing microfilm reels and trying to find the original articles. And it was real hands-on work that I am especially proud of Mark and I for doing, because it was a real labor of love. We really wanted this story to get out there. We felt it had been suppressed for so long, and hopefully we brought some answers to people that were looking for them.
Did you get a chance to talk to her parents and this Assemblies of God pastor who came up with these theories?
Well, her parents have since passed away, but we spoke with 3 of her sisters, a couple nieces and nephews, who were all, by and large, very, very much supportive. They gave us hours and hours of interviews, worked with us pretty much the whole way through. And yes, we did find the pastor that helped coin a lot of these rumors that were going around in like the New York Daily News and the Post. His name was Pastor Tate, an evangelical preacher based in Elizabeth, New Jersey. It's a strange facet of the case. And I know I sound like a broken record there, but you just keep peeling back all these layers. And it's okay. Half of the people that knew her say, oh, she was this wild child party girl, summer of love, man. And the other half will tell you, no, she was a pious and devout Christian who was targeted by Satanists because of her devotion to her faith, and she was sacrificed because of it. And the bulk of that theory came from that pastor. And the very weird thing about that is, when we tracked him down in 2012, he seemed to have very little memory of telling the newspapers that. He did a complete 180 on the phone with Mark and I, saying, oh, no, she was rebellious. She was reading a book on Satanism, and she got caught up in this group meeting up in the Watchung Reservation, which kind of brought everything back full circle. Our knowledge of the case came through these letters about the Watchung Reservation. And now here we have her pastor telling us that she herself was taking part in satanic rituals in that patch of woods. So let alone trying to find out who killed her, trying to find the real Jeanette De Palma became an adventure in and of itself.
Now, it says that it was 16 years old, and they only discovered the body because the dog found a piece of the body, an arm. Did her parents report her missing? How long was she reported missing?
She was reported missing almost immediately. Jeanette, as you mentioned, she was found on September 19th, 1972, but she'd actually gone missing on August 7th. She left her home that day telling her parents, I'm going to go hop on a train and go see a friend of mine in Berkeley Heights. Well, she never made it to the train station, never made it to her friend's house. She was never seen again. So that night, the parents called the Springfield Police Department and said, our daughter is missing. And they said, yeah, you're going to have to wait 24 hours to file a formal report. She could just be a runaway. So they were shocked. They were horrified. They thought, you report a kid missing, the cops go out and find him right away. But, there was nothing they could do. So they waited the standard 24 hours. They reported her missing the next day. And from the mouths of the retired officers themselves who we interviewed most of the ones that are still alive. And they said, we didn't bother looking for her. She had a reputation as a partier. She was also a teenager. Teenagers just run away. We just did not put the manpower into it.
Yeah, also, too, in 1972, you got to remember, the drinking age was 18. So 16-year-olds, I would be in bars at 16, So it was like a whole different world back in those days. How old are you?
I am going to be 29 soon.
29 years old? You're a little kid.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So they keep telling me. I don't feel like one, though.
I'll fix it with my daughter.
This work ages you.
Yeah, I know it does. Because you got a podcast, too, right? Tell me about your podcast real quick, and we'll get back to the story.
Well, I host two. Well, I host one and I co-host the other. The first one that I host is called the Devil's Teeth Podcast. If you come away from this interview tonight and you want to read more about this case, but you don't want to wait for the book to be shipped to you, or you don't have a Kindle, go over to Twitter. Go to twitter.com/Devil's Teeth Pod, POD, all one word. And I've got a podcast all about this case. And it's a narrative podcast. I narrate it. And I utilize the interview tapes that myself and Mark Moran recorded throughout the course of our investigation. So the people that were there are telling you the story alongside me. It's almost like an interactive experience. So go over there and listen to that. And I co-host another podcast, which is it's kind of like a satirical. I don't want to say lighthearted because it's definitely not safe for work. We're from New Jersey, most of us. We have potty mouths. But it's called Podcast 1289. And we basically look at the most bizarre UFO reports, conspiracy theories, ghost sightings, cryptids, stuff like that. And we just kind of lampoon them. We tear them to shreds as only a bunch of 20-something nerds can. And you can find us at twitter.com/podcast 1289. We talk about everything from Bigfoot to DB Cooper.
Excellent. But now with this Devil's Teeth podcast, you have enough content to do a weekly show about just this topic?
It started out as weekly, but then bringing everything kind of back to the beginning again. Just as I started it was when I got the phone call to do the Ricky Kasso book. So now it's kind of been intermittent. It's going to start back up again in a few weeks now because I'm actually scheduled to hand in the manuscript in about 3 weeks, actually. God, it's really creeping up on me.
Yeah, you better get going on that. Now,
I haven't written a word yet.
Yeah, why do they call it Devil's Teeth? Is that what this place was called, the Devil's Teeth?
Yeah, that's another, and you're going to hear this word a lot. It's another strange aspect of the De Palma case. This girl was found lying on top of a cliff that had been known for at least 50 years as the Devil's Teeth. And the reason why this cliff was known as that is because if you're standing on the other side, the area where she was right up against the cliff edge. So you keep going, it's a straight drop about 40 feet to the quarry floor. Now, if you're standing on that quarry floor and you're looking up at this cliff, there's a picture of it on the cover of our book. It's chilling. It looks like an upside down skull. And it looked even more like that during the time that she was found, because the rock quarry was owned by the Hudai Materials Company, and they used to deposit their waste rock onto the ridge of this cliff top. So it looked like a row of teeth on top of this upside down skull. It's just one of these weird things. It's like, okay, this girl is found, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, how do you know it was a murder? How do you know she didn't just overdose up there or, commit suicide? And it would just be too coincidentally, she's found on top of this cliff, known to locals for decades as the Devil's Teeth, only a mile away from this supposed hotspot of devil worshippers and witch covens. You couldn't make this stuff up. The best Hollywood screenwriter could not come up with this.
Now, you said that there were satanic items. What kind of items were found around the body?
It depends on who you ask.
Okay.
We've heard everything from the first officer on the scene told Mark and I that it was a large cross that was made out of tree branches and sticks up by the head of the body, and that the head, which was little more than a skull, she had been laying there during a very, very hot summer for 6 weeks. Around her skull was an arrangement of little stones in the shape of a semicircle that he told us resembled, to him, it looked like a halo, which is weird because the papers were saying, occult objects, satanic stuff. And it was more Judeo-Christian symbols. Other variants of the crime scene that day was supposedly there were logs around the body in the shape of a coffin. And inside this coffin-shaped perimeter were a bunch of smaller crosses made out of twigs and stuff. The other more fantastical things that we've heard, we got anonymous letters saying that there were dead animals that were strewn about around her. Some of them were supposedly in jars. Other of them were hanging by rope from trees. The cops that we spoke to say they saw nothing like that, but you never know. I mean, so much time had passed, and if not to sound like, too much like Jesse Ventura, like it's a conspiracy, but if these people, don't want this hardcore gossip getting out there about cults, of course, maybe they'll tell some people like, oh, no, we didn't see anything like that. Because you never know. We never got a hold of the crime scene photos, which is a whole other rabbit hole. But long story short, the Springfield Police and the Union County Prosecutor's Office absolutely refused to let us look at anything from the file, not a peep.
Really? From a case from 1972?
Absolutely nothing.
Really?
We said, you can pick what we can look at. We'll come in person so you don't have to scan it so it won't leak. We'll give you the information that we have. We'll trade. Obviously, you'll want this information. And they said, nope, sorry. It's an open case. Can't comment. Can't show you nothing.
Fascinating. Okay, so now, did you get a chance to talk off the record to any of the cops who worked on the case, any of those old detectives?
Yeah, we spoke to the officer that was first on the scene, okay. His partner, a couple people in the detective bureau who were not on the scene, but were coordinating with the patrol officer, stuff like that. One of the unfortunate things was the lead detective on the case, a gentleman by the name of Sam Calabrese. He was very dodgy when we asked him, like, hey, we understand you were the lead investigator. Could we interview you on or off the record? And he sent us an email reply saying, yeah, I was the detective. I'll speak to you, but only after you tell me what questions you're going to ask me, and I'm not going to allow you to record it. So we said, okay. It's sometimes when you're working in journalism, you have to do that. And so we sent him a list of the questions along with assurances that we would not record him, asked him when and where he wanted to meet, and he just stopped replying. We kept on him, sending him an email and a letter once every 6 months for the next 2 years until he died, taking whatever he knew about the case with him. It was very frustrating. We were really hoping to talk to him.
Now, these rumors of a cult, right? Was this like you said you got letters to the magazine there, the Weird New Jersey magazine. Now, were they describing like a ragtag bunch of kids, kind of like the Ricky Kasso kind of cult, ragtag acid kids, out there drinking beer and doing wackiness? Or was this more of a organized cult like you hear about with the Son of Sam case where they had millionaires and very powerful people and with the Process Church kind of cult? What kind of cult were they talking about?
I think it was somewhere more along the lines of the Ricky Kasso quote-unquote cult in Northport. Basically, because everyone sort of had their own vision of it. Like, we only spoke to one or two people that actually claimed to have seen these people in action. And it's not like that these were BS reports, that these were phantom cult members. The cops were finding stuff in this patch of woods all the time. Bowls of blood, animals torn apart, stuff like this. There were police reports to back this stuff up. It wasn't just suburban panic. But as far as it being anything, shadowy like the Bilderberg group or anything like that, it wasn't that. It was more, I think that they were afraid that the local teenagers had gotten together and formed something along the lines of what the New York Daily News and the New York Post thought that the Knights of the Black Circle were about in the Kasso case, which we'll get to later. Basically, teenage kids, robes, chanting, reading from the Satanic Bible, and sacrificing animals, and ultimately later people. It was kids, but they thought they were organized. And they all told me this was the first time we started locking our doors. I mean, what's scarier to a bunch of middle-aged, average suburban parents than the idea of their children's peers, or worse, their own child, falling hostage to the literal devil and worrying about who are they going to go for next? Are they going to come for me? So it was a shocking time. It was the end of innocence for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was 72. I guess I was about in the 5th, 6th grade, and it was a scary time. You had all that Manson stuff going on, and these hippie kids with their long hair and stuff. It was all new. It was it was scary stuff. It was just all brand new, and you heard about LSD and all this kind of. So it was kind of, it was a scary time. I lived in the Bronx at that time. Then we moved to Staten Island later because we talked off the air a little bit.
Were you still in the Bronx when old Son of Sam came about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah. Oh yeah.
I'll have to pick your brain about that sometime. I bet you've got some stories there.
Well, we do a bunch of shows about Son of Sam and the Process Church, and I was associated with Maury Terry. I just had on Mike Cadella.
The Ultimate Evil.
Yeah. We just had on Mike Cadella, who was the cop who reopened the case, and then they shut him down. They told him to shut down the case.
I heard about that, yeah. And it is a very interesting thing, not to go down a whole other tangent with that, but I think the biggest smoking gun in that case, in my opinion, as and I'm not 100% well read on this case, but I know enough about it to go, I think it's very interesting that David Berkowitz does not match any of the witness descriptions of what the Son of Sam looked like from the people that survived.
Oh, yeah.
You look at all those witness sketches, and it looks like 5 different people, and Berkowitz is none of them.
Oh yeah. There's a wealth of information in that case. Now, back to this girl here. I got her name here. What's this?
Jeanette
De Palma, right? Now, she must have had like a best friend or a boyfriend or something like that. Were those people contact and talk to?
We spoke with her best friend. The best friend was actually the girl she was going to go see that day.
Okay.
And she is just as confused as the rest. I mean, she said that she was coming over that day. She did mention to us that she knew that Jeanette lied to her parents. Jeanette told her parents that she was going to hop a train over to Berkeley Heights to meet her there. But Gail said, well, she told her parents that not to worry, but she was hitchhiking over. So that was another aspect to the story of, okay, well, now we have a scenario where, because one of the big things was, how did she get in the woods? Because this area of woods where she was found near the quarry was the complete opposite direction of Berkeley Heights. She would have no business being over there if she was trying to get to her friend's house. So now with the revelation of she was hitchhiking that day, we knew that there was now the possibility that she was picked up by someone with ulterior motives, shall we say.
That's interesting. Now, let's say she was picked up in a car hitchhiking, and then the guy drove over to this Devil's Teeth. How far would they have to walk from the nearest parking spot to get over to that location?
Well, that's the thing. It wouldn't have been something like that.
Okay.
The side that her body was found on is off of a 2-lane blacktop, leading all the way up the hill in Springfield to her neighborhood. There's no parking lot on that side. And the parking lot on the other side, the actual operational quarry side, is gated off. So without giving too much of that book away, we don't think that she was there willingly. We think that something may have happened in the car that ended up with her being on that cliff.
Okay. And now, do you have any suspects in mind, actual physical suspects with names that you think might be behind this?
Mark and I identified 3 people in our book that we feel are the best candidates for being responsible for the death of Jeanette De Palma. To be truthful, under oath, I am on the fence between 2 of them, and I would have been 100% for one of them if Mark and I did not make a discovery very late in the writing of the book. If we had made this discovery a month later, it would have never ended up in it. But it just kind of threw everything up into arms where we were just like, okay, so now what? It's you answer one question in that case and 5 more open up. But if there is any solution to that unsolved cold case, I believe it lies with one of those 3 people that we identified.
What led you to those 3 people and then ultimately the one person that you have a strong suspicion on?
Well, one of the things that went incredibly unreported in this case was Jeanette De Palma was not the only girl to go missing in the area at that time and later turn up dead. There was a young woman named Joan Kramer who was abducted while hitchhiking only a week after Jeanette vanished and only 6 miles away in South Orange. She was picked up while hitchhiking in the middle of the night. She had just gotten into an argument with her boyfriend, stormed out of the house and went downtown, got into a gentleman's car, Car drove off, and she was found 2 weeks later, very similar to Jeanette, in a wooded area, lying face down. There was a souvenir taken from the body, which matched a souvenir taken from Jeanette. And the doctors, the best guess they could make was that, because there was also decomposition, the best guess the doctors could make was that she had been strangled. Now, because especially back then, police departments do not necessarily coordinate well with each other, it kind of went unreported, save for one or two tiny articles in the I believe it was the Newark Star-Ledger that reported it, saying, by the way, another young woman was found dead in the same area, Joan Kramer of South Orange, and if you have any tips, call this special tip line at the prosecutor's office. So I started diving down the rabbit hole of the Kramer case, which is also technically an unsolved case. And it's technically unsolved because of this. A guy was arrested for the murder in I believe he was arrested in January of 1975. And his name was Otto Nilsson. He was a disgraced alcoholic accountant that was living in Maplewood, which is the next town over from South Orange. Basically, a witness put him at the scene, said, I saw the Kramer girl get into this guy's car. And the cops did a little bit more investigating and eventually got a arrest warrant. So they arrested him in January 1975. They put him on trial in, I believe, July. It's funny. Once you start another book, you start the dates start to become fuzzy. I probably should have brought a copy in here. But long story short, the jury didn't feel that, one eyewitness saying, yeah, I saw him driving the car she got into was enough to pin a murder rap on this guy. So they let him go. But the story with him did not end there. He later was committed for taking a rifle into the Veterans Hospital nearby and holding two doctors hostage. So that was the first big suspect there. There was also another person that Mark and I were informed of. I don't know if groundskeeper is the right word. He was a guy that occasionally caddied at the golf course that's across the road from the quarry where De Palma was found. It was a guy named Red Keir. We don't know if Red was his proper name or a nickname, but everyone just knew him as Baltus Roll Red. He worked at the golf course, the famous Baltus Roll golf course in Springfield. And what we were told by the police was, oh yeah, we got this tip that this caddy was living in the woods back there. He would get up in the morning, wash himself in the stream, caddy at the golf course, and then come back and bury his money. And had a shack made out of like a corrugated tin sheet. And he was cooking with pots and pans over a fire, stuff like that. Very weird character. And we were told that when the Springfield Police Department was made aware of his existence, that they went back to that area to try and interview him, and they found that his camp had been completely deserted. They interviewed him. They eventually let him go for a very stupid reason that we get into in the book. And we were never able to find him. We think we know what happened to him, but it's kind of hard when you don't even know if that's the guy's real name or the real spelling. It was a very, very difficult avenue to go down, but we exhausted it as best as we could.
Oh yeah, if you're looking for a guy in a tin shack cooking outside over an open fire, that's a good locate for you. That's a nice little skip trace to work on. Now what about this guy?
Chasing a ghost, basically.
Yeah, well, and plus if it's a common name, God forbid. But unless he has a criminal record. Now what about this guy Red, this homeless guy?
Well, that was the thing with him. We had heard rumors that he supposedly had family down in Georgia. We tried tracking him down there, but unfortunately, Keir is a very, very common name down there. We checked newspaper archives for any mention of him, like if he had gotten picked up by the police or anything like that. We submitted Freedom of Information Act requests to the county cops to see if they ever arrested him on anything. They went ignored. Yeah. It was almost a blind alley with him. We think I'll put it to you this way. We don't believe that he is still living, and we get into that in the book, which is another strange mystery, more gossip from ex-cops. I mean, that is one of the, I don't want to call it a perk, but it's one of the things that Mark and I get to do with our job that is a very interesting thing. We get to interview a lot of ex-law enforcement officers, and I tell you what, you'll never get a better story from any of them because they're bored. They miss the glory days, and they want to tell you all about the crazy stuff that went down. So we have tapes, hours and hours and hours of the retired investigator on this case, just spilling the beans on all of it, and it was a huge help, because if you don't have the case file in front of you, well, guess what? You're going to have to go and make a case file of your own. So you talk to the family, you talk to the cops who originally did it, and you try to piece all of these factions together to try and make a coherent story.
Yeah, the book we're talking about is Death on Devil's Teeth, the strange murder that shocked suburban New Jersey. And it's got great reviews on Amazon. And there's a link. I put the link up on Opperman Report on Facebook and stuff like that. And it already sold a couple of books today. Okay, already sold 4 books before the show even aired. So I saw you. You're doing okay there. All right. Now,
I gotta tell you, not to pander or anything, but I have the greatest readers on planet Earth. I have the most supportive friends. The great thing that really gave us a lot of motivation and inertia with writing about the De Palma case was, Mark, Moran and Mark Skurman of Weird New Jersey, had been writing about this case since 1998, and Moran and I joined forces in 2012. So you had this reader base. Weird New Jersey has over 100,000 subscribers on Facebook alone. Who knows how many magazine subscriptions? But all of these people were waiting. They had been following the case too. This is arguably the most unsettling thing that they had reported on. And so we had all these people that were behind us. They were like, go get the information. Let's see if we can solve this together. And we had a lot of subscribers and readers of the magazine offer help, whether it be, I could put you in touch with someone who knew the cops back then, or, I knew the family from down the block. Yeah, so it was almost a group effort. It was great having all of these people cheering us on and helping us out with our research. And then when the book came out, how many times does a first book have a built-in audience? So, to what Weird New Jersey lovingly refers to as the cult of the letter senders, I bow to you all. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, speaking of those letters, are the letters in the book?
Mm-hmm.
Do those?
Yeah, and they are weird.
Yeah, okay.
Some of them are blood-curdling. Some of them are only a sentence long. Others go on for 9 pages and are completely nonsensical. But there is a story there. There is this strange thing of this event that united all of these people to go, I have to tell this magazine what I think happened. But these people were so afraid of whatever repercussions might come their way that 99.9% of them are no return address. They're unsigned. They're written on typewriters. The ones that are signed, underlined 3 times. Do not use my name, please. I fear what will happen to me.
So these were physical snail mail letters that were being mailed to the magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going all the way back to 1998, and then there were some more emails, and a kind of funny story about the research process of this is, like I said, when you're going all the way back into analog, using the microfilm reels and trying to get a hold of U-matic tapes of news broadcasts and all that, you kind of get into this mentality of it's like archaeology. It's got to be so hard to get this piece of information I need. And you kind of forget, why don't you just try emailing some of these people? Mark printed out a stack of the original emails that he got in 2003, 2004 about the case. And I was trying to find, because the woman left her name, I was trying to find her. She was a friend of Jeanette's. And I was coming up empty because she later married and taken on a new last name. But then the last resort was, well, let me try the email address on here that's 12 years old. And sure enough, she was still using it. And I got a reply. And it was just one of those things. It was like, who still uses their email address from 12 years ago? But it worked. And that's where a big break in the case came. This person gave us a earth-shattering piece of information that really sets up the last half of the book.
With some of these other cases, like that they made a movie about it, The River's Edge, and then even with the Kasso case, that they were conducting like tours of the crime scene, like the local kids were bringing people to see the body. Were there local kids that were gossiping about this that seemed to have more information than they were letting go public?
With the kids, no, not in the De Palma case. People seem to really be sincere when they told us they had no idea what happened to Jeanette for the 6 weeks that she was missing. Most people, Jeanette kind of had a history of running away. There was some turmoil in the family, nothing terribly out of the ordinary. And she had been known to just run away and stay with friends for a week or two. And so when she'd gone missing, the family, for some reason, thought that she was in Manhattan. I guess she had said something at one point like, when I'm done with school, I want to go to New York. So the family went to New York City and posted flyers drove around looking for her. So everyone just kind of assumed, I guess, maybe she ran off with one of her friends or she's in New York or something, which made it all the more shocking when the body was found. As far as anyone actually knowing she was there is a theory that a couple of the retired cops put forth to us that Mark and I honestly don't think is true. A lot of these investigators kind of wrote her off, like I said, as a party girl, and said, maybe she was at this house party and she OD'd on something and the kids panicked and they just took her body there. Which is kind of weird because one, not a single person told us that Jeanette De Palma ever used any kind of hard drug, especially not something that could kill you in one night. And the other thing, too, is of all the places you're going to dump a body, like on top of a 40-foot cliff inside of an active construction site, there are a million other places that they could have put her other than there that would have been easier and she never would have been found. So that whole theory to us fell apart rather quickly. So as far as people knowing she was there, I think the only people that knew she was there is the person that killed her.
Could one person have carried the body up there? Was it a bit of a hike, or would it have taken?
I'll put it to you this way. I've been to the Devil's Teeth 4 times in the course of writing the book. I am 6'3", over 250. I'm built like a linebacker. I'll put it to you that way. And each time I have tried to scale this hill, because it's a very steep, forget the quarry side. The quarry side is a total vertical drop, so you're not getting up that unless you got a ladder. In fact, the fire department had to get her remains down with a ladder. That's how steep it was. Each time that I went to the Devil's Teeth, despite my build, I've fallen, and I've fallen pretty hard. And I wasn't carrying anything. I was carrying a camera. So the idea of one person just throwing her over their shoulder and scaling to the top of this cliff, I don't think so. And even bringing in more people, a concentrated effort between 2, 3, 4, 5 people, especially at night, there's nothing but trees in this place. No moonlight would have shined through. It's very dark. And I don't think they would have been able to do it. It just makes no sense. It just falls apart pretty quickly. But there's always the 0.001% chance it could have happened. Stranger things have happened, but in my personal opinion, over the 4 years of research I did for this book, I don't think that's what happened.
Okay, gotcha. Now back to the letters. Did the letters point to any specific person and actually name a name?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
Which presented a problem for the magazine because, there are libel laws. Most of these people that were referred to were still living at the time. And so the marks couldn't print them. There were a couple they printed where the name was redacted. And then the people that wrote the letters would call the office and say, I told you who did it. Why didn't you print it? And of course, Mark would just say, well, there are libel laws. We're trying to keep the magazine running. But behind the scenes, we were able to use those names and start doing some investigation of our own.
And how'd that turn out?
That's where suspect number 3 came from. And that is where I'm going to say you'll have to read the book, because that's the twist in the book. Okay,
the book is Devil. No, it's not Devil. The book is Death on Devil's Teeth, The Strange Murder That Shocked Suburban New Jersey. It's up on Amazon.com. The author's name is Jesse Pollack. Now, did you turn those letters over to the cops?
Oh, yeah. The cops actually came knocking for him. Another, here we go like a broken record. Another weird aspect of this case was the family, a member of the family saw the initial Weird New Jersey coverage and mistakenly felt that they were withholding information, that they must have known something that they weren't printing that would have solved the case. And this is going back like 2003, 2004. So the Springfield police called Mark Moran and said, we understand you have some information on the De Palma case. We would like it. And Mark said, yeah, sure. I mean, all we've really got are some anonymous letters. A lot of them are pretty kooky, but I'll be more than happy to give them to you. In the meantime, do you think we could look at the case file? And the guy said, oh, no, we can't. I believe this was the lieutenant in charge of homicide that had called Mark. And he said, oh, no, we can't show that to you. It's an open case. And even if it wasn't, we don't have it anymore. And Mark's like, what? And he goes, yeah, no, we lost the case file in 1999 when Hurricane Floyd rolled through. So there was that. And then what was even weirder was I spoke to another person from the homicide unit who had since retired, and he told me in 2013, oh no, that case file was missing long before Hurricane Floyd. I was looking for that case file in our archives in 1984 and I couldn't find it. So there's this element now of the Springfield Police Department is saying it was either lost or destroyed, whether intentionally so or not. And then there's the matter of, in any homicide case, the Union County Prosecutor's Office would have been given a copy because if an arrest is made, the prosecutor's office handles the criminal proceedings. And that's where we got the door slammed in our face by saying, yeah, we got a copy, but no, you can't see it. Have a good one. So they have more or less everything that we have, but we have nothing from them.
That's really fascinating, because one of the oldest tricks in the book is when you go to interview someone, you bring a big, giant file. You could have a phone book in there. It doesn't matter what's in there. You put some old papers in there. You print out some stuff, and you got a big file. And you just kind of slam it, and it has the guy's name on it, You slam it down there on the desk. Say, listen, we got to talk. I need answers. You start talking for a police department to admit that they lost the file is such you've just given away such an interrogation technique. How big is this police department?
Moderate sized. I mean,
guys and a coffee pot.
Yeah, no. It's not a small village or anything like that. I mean, it's not a city, but it's a decent size and it's a nice town. It isn't rinky dink and it's not Mayberry either. So it was very surprising that it's like, wait, you kept these in the basement first off, and you let it flood. Yeah. But that's just one story they tell you. Like I said, we talked to another guy that said, no way, that file was missing in 84. So there, and on top of all that, it just gets weirder and weirder. We got an email while writing the book from a guy in the fire department that said, oh yeah, hey, I hear you're rattling some cages with the De Palma case. I just went back to Springfield over Christmas time and said hi to my buddies in the police department. And they told me that they found the De Palma file in the attic of the old Girl Scout house, which they were using for storage. So I said, oh, great. So I sent a Freedom of Information Act request over to Springfield. And, of course, it was, oh, no, you must have been given mistaken information. We never found any file. The file is lost and destroyed. Have a nice day. So it just begs the question, why? If they are concealing something. Why? What's the point? It's 40-something years later. I mean, it's obvious BS that they don't have the file anymore. And that's coming from their own mouths. Their own retirees are saying, no, it wasn't destroyed in Floyd. It was long gone years before. So it was just another avenue that Mark and I had to go down in this case. It was just another piece of the spider web.
Around that time in the 70s, how many homicides were they handling in a year?
Not a lot. If I remember correctly, the De Palma case is one of only two unsolved homicides in Springfield history, and it was the first homicide since the 1950s.
Now, in looking into this, is there any possibility in your mind that this could be an elaborate satanic cult or witches cult that has political influence and influence within the police department? Because you hear about that kind of stuff all the time.
Wouldn't surprise me. We definitely found some occult connections, and this is still. I just want to put this out there because we get a lot of questions about this all the time. This is still a moving case. Just because we put the book out almost 2 years ago now, God, time goes fast. It is. We're not done with it. We still get tips, emails, letters, everything about this case. That's one of the reasons why I started up the Devil's Teeth podcast, because Mark and I went to our publisher and basically said, listen, we've gotten this wave of new information in since the book came out, because people that we were not able to find while we were looking for them literally started calling us saying, hey, I just walked into a Barnes & Noble and I saw a book and it looked interesting. It turns out my name's in it. It's a case that I worked. You want to talk? Yeah. So then there's another 2-hour interview on tape, and it keeps branching out from there. And we said to our publisher, look, can we please do a revised and updated edition? Because there's all these new facts. And they told us, nah, we don't really do that. So the one way that we're able to keep this information out there and keep investigating it is through the podcast and, of course, through the updates that we're going to be doing through the magazine itself. So if you're interested in this case now or after reading the book, you can keep up with it at Devil's Teeth Pod on Twitter, or go to weirdnj.com and grab yourself a subscription. And if people want to contact you with tips right now, how would they get a hold of you? Twitter? Yeah, get a hold of me on Twitter. I'm at J Pollack Author. That's JPOLLACK Author. And yeah, just send me a message or just send an email over to Weird New Jersey if you don't use Twitter. We all forward each other on whatever emails we get related to the case. So if you can't find me on Twitter or you don't use Twitter, just go over to weirdnewjersey.com and hit that contact button. And I'm not sure if I asked you this or if it slipped my mind or what, but I actually just made it to the studio like 5 minutes before the show started because I got pulled over by the cops. I hear you. So I'm still a little distracted, but I made it out alive. Now, these suspects that you came up with, that people named, did you actually get a chance to talk to these people on the phone or meet them in person? No, they all three of them are no longer living. Okay. And one of them we just missed by about 10 months. He died 10 months before we started the book. So not to give too much away, I don't want that to frustrate any potential listeners, because it wasn't too much of a hampering, because let's face it, those guys probably wouldn't have talked to us anyway. But we got documents on them. We interviewed people who knew them and the cops that looked into them when they were reported to them. So it is a very intriguing part of this case that I think, one of the roadblocks we kind of encountered while trying to get this book published was all of the big names turned us down, including my current publisher, Simon & Schuster, basically just because they said, look, it doesn't have an ending. It doesn't have, there's no arrest to end it with. You can't definitively answer it. And we never really, we could kind of see why that was a hindrance to them. But at the same time, the whole reason we went into this is because deep down inside, everyone loves good mystery. I mean, look at the Zodiac case. No one knows who that was, but there was the Graysmith book. There was the incredible David Fincher film. Lizzie Borden, that's technically unsolved, and she's gotten got a dozen movies, a TV series with Christina Ricci, Jack the Ripper. God, how many Jack the Ripper books are there now? I mean, now there's theories that Jack the Ripper was actually a woman, and then there's Patricia Cornwell saying it was the painter Walter Sickert. So we never saw that personally as a hindrance. We always felt that the story of this case was the journey it took into finding answers, because it was never ever just about, oh, this question is answered. Okay, we're done with that one. No, it always blossomed into this whole brand new web of intrigue. And I know I'm talking a whole lot about the case right now, but trust me, I am just barely scratching the surface. Definitely check out the book.
Yeah, and the book is Death on Devil's Teeth, The Strange Murder That Shocked Suburban New Jersey by Jesse Pollack. It's up on Amazon.com. Now, these three suspects, these three guys, did you get a chance to talk to their ex-wives or disgruntled girlfriends or kids and neighbors, stuff like that?
We tried, and we did not hear a reply back, which we took as a polite no. I mean, the one person that had kids, the kids were very young. They wouldn't have known anything. Like I said, we're going back, 40 years at this point. But it wasn't a terrible hindrance. The one suspect, Otto Nilsson, had caused so much trouble in his neighborhood during the years that he was there while this was all going on, that his neighbors were more than happy to give interviews to us to say, listen, this is why this guy was arrested for killing the Kramer girl. It wasn't just the cops wanted a suspect and they grabbed some poor innocent guy. This guy had been causing trouble for years and had been suspected of another murder. I want to say 5, 6, maybe 7 years before the Kramer girl died. So there's a lot of backstory with that particular suspect. It's incredible how scary it is.
We are at the break. We'll be coming back. We're going to talk more with Jesse Pollack. We're going to be talking about The Acid King, his new book coming out about Ricky Kasso. But you can find Death on Devil's Teeth, The Strange Murder That Shocked Suburban New Jersey on Amazon.com. Also at OppermanReport.com in the bookstore. We'll be right back after these messages. And now a word from our sponsors. Did you know that 30% of all people on online dating websites and personal ads are either married or in a monogamous relationship? 30%. If you suspect that your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend may be cheating online, go to emailrevealer.com. And our online infidelity investigation. You give us their email address, and we can trace it back to online personal ads, dating sites, and social networks. We can even expand the investigation and find them cheating on escort service sites or even porn sites if they're registered to porn sites and swinger sites. So check out emailrevealer.com if you suspect your spouse is cheating, and check out our online infidelity investigation. William Ramsey is a producer here at the Opperman Report, and he's just come out with a new book, Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. Now, he just sent me a copy of this book. Oh, boy, it's about 2 inches thick, and there's a chapter on just about everybody in this book that you can imagine. The Beatles, and Jack Parsons, everybody's in here. It's incredible. And I definitely recommend this book. There's a bunch of pictures in here, too, of all these people and different chapters and information. Anselm LaVey and people I've never heard of, too. There's a whole bunch in here. J.C. JFC Fuller. I don't know who he is. But it's great stuff by our producer here, William Ramsey. So check out Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow Over Humanity. You can find it on Amazon.com, or you could find it in the OppermanReport.com bookstore. We have an urgent bulletin. It seems that the group Strawman is still on the loose. It has been confirmed that Strawman are Canadian, okay, and that authorities are asking people to stay indoors, lock your doors and windows until this group can be dealt with. You could find more information about this group of Canadians, at strawmanmusic.com. You can have your ad played here. Okay, we're looking for sponsors. Okay, in fact, we desperately need sponsors right now to take this show to the next level. So you can have your your ad played here, read live, like I'm doing now, so artfully. Or we can even work up a little jingle for you with some music and stuff like that and play it here. You have no idea how inexpensive it would be to have your ad played on the Opperman Report on 7 stations. Live Friday night, and another 7 stations live on Saturday night, plus replayed every day of the week on different stations, and then archived on YouTube, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and all different kinds of podcasts, Pod This and Podbean, all different kinds of places who archive the show for us. And on those archives, your ad would play indefinitely, forever. The range covers 5 million people in population where your ad would be broadcast, and all these other stations would be thrown in for free. So really affordable prices to sponsor OppermanReport.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You can get a copy of that book at emailrevealer.com, or you can get a copy of that book now. It's back up on Amazon.com. How to Become a Successful Private Investigator by Ed Opperman. And this book has been updated a little bit from the previous book that we had that was available to our wonderful listeners.
Conspiracy theory. Strategy of New World Order resistance. High-profile court cases in the news. And interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Before we get back to our guest, Jesse P. Pollack, author of the book Death on Devil's Teeth, The Strange Murder That Shocked Suburban New Jersey. Don't forget our great sponsor, Phoebe Sod, pscocoa.com. That's pscocoa.com. They got the finest silky smooth chocolates you could ever want. They got all kinds of cake mixes and brownie mixes, martini mixes, barbecue sauces. Check out pscocoa.com. Click on the Purchase Now button, or Shop Now, I think it's called, at Phoebe Sod's chocolate website. And you can also go into the chocolate business. You can sell some chocolate. You can set up your own little website there and have it promoted there, sell your, and get a little piece of the action there. A little piece of the pie. They got chocolate pie, too, I think they have on there, too. Okay, we got Jesse Pollack. Jesse, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay. Can I say, where were you that day when this girl got killed? Okay. Jesse, do you have an alibi, Jesse? Let's get to the bottom of this. Are there any questions I forgot?
I am declining to answer upon advice of counsel.
Wise man. Is there any questions you think I forgot to ask you about this girl,
Jeanette?
Jeanette case?
No, I don't think, I think if I give away too much more, I don't think anyone's going to want to go out and read the book. So I will just say about that, like, if you are looking for a true life American mystery that does not reveal its secrets easily and does not, tie everything up in a nice little bow for you, go out and read Death on the Devil's Teeth. It was a life-changing experience. researching and writing that book. And it's a case that's still being, I can't speak for the police, but it's being actively investigated by Mark Moran and myself. It's a real life American nightmare. Definitely go check it out.
Now, this other book, it's not out yet, called Acid King.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about
Oh, sorry. No, that was something that it really is a spiritual sequel almost to Death on the Devil's Teeth, because after Devil's Teeth came out, I was approached by Simon & Schuster that said, hey, listen, we're getting ready to start up this new true crime line that's being spearheaded by an author friend of mine, Eve Porenchak. Her book, One Cut, comes out in, I believe 2 months already now. It comes out in May, along with Deepwater, the next book in the series, but it's called Simon True. And basically they came to me and said, what do you got? We're looking for something with that kind of teenage nostalgia edge that we're seeing, with stuff like Stranger Things and of the like right now. And I said, well, there was this case that I know about in Long Island in 1984. There was a kid named Ricky Kasso who brutally, and I mean brutally, murdered a friend of his named Gary Lauwers in the woods. And when he was arrested for it, straight up told the cops, yeah, I sacrificed him to the devil. And they said, all right, run with it, go. And so I've spent the last 15, 16 months of my life working on this case. And it is just as confusing and frustrating and horrifying as the De Palma case was, if not more. It's another thing where the greatest Hollywood screenwriter could not come up with how shocking this story really is. And it's really been an eye-opening experience to go back and look at the information. Unlike the De Palma case, I have gotten the majority of the case files for this one. I've spoken to the families of both Ricky and Gary and interviewed the cops that worked the case. So unlike the first one, where I really had to start from scratch as far as documents were concerned, with the Acid King, I have a pile of documents that is probably about 10 inches thick.
So now people will remember Kasso because he was wearing an AC/DC T-shirt when he got caught, and he was parading around, hammering it up for the cameras when they were taking him in there. You're not going to forget this kid. He looks a lot like my cousin looked at the time, too.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, because in 1984 this happened, so this is right in the middle of that kind of wild time that was going on around Long Island with this kind of stuff. So tell us about Ricky Kasso. Tell us about him.
Well, I guess to go to the start of this case, Ricky Kasso was, by all accounts, originally your average suburban kid. He was born in March 1967 in Huntington, Long Island. His parents were both school teachers in the Northport School District. The father was a football coach, also coached basketball and I believe wrestling. Very suburban, white bread, white picket fence, upbringing. And then something went drastically wrong around the time he was 11 or 12 years old. Started getting caught up in drugs. He got arrested for burglary when he was in the 8th grade with 5 other kids. Broke into a church at one point, stole all the cash from a collection box, and supposedly stole some of the hosts too, which is weird, because I wonder what he did with those. But definitely just started heading down the wrong path. And a few years after going down that dark road, things got even worse when, by all accounts, he just became obsessed with the idea of being a Satanist. Now, after the murder, the newspapers went wild and claimed that there was a cult on Long Island, but I don't believe that to be the case. The police straight up deny it. They say that whole cult thing was a misunderstanding between their press officer and the newspapers. But he definitely was a person that was seduced by his own idea of the dark side. And he wasn't the only one either. He had friends that were interested in too. You know, there's some accounts that say that Gary Lauwers walked around with a copy of the Satanic Bible in order to kind of show off to Ricky before he was murdered. So there was this culture of teenage rebellion in the late 70s, early 80s on Long Island where, you know, kids as young as 10 or 11 were dropping acid, smoking angel dust, and walking around saying, yeah, I'm a Satanist, to scare people. And you throw that in with the, you know, the panic that was already going on against. And it's kind of hilarious to think of it now. But I mean, you'll remember this back then. Parents were terrified that Dungeons and Dragons were going to turn their kids into Satanists. So these kids were going out of their way to be the scariest thing that they could be to their parents. And I saw it as like raising a fist to society in general. So this all was already brewing. It had been a long time coming, and it culminated in April of 1984 when Ricky passed out at a party that he was attending with a bunch of his friends, Gary Lauwers included. And Gary, who was known to be kind of a pickpocket around town, reached into Ricky's pocket and stole 10 bags of angel dust from him. He thought no one was watching him. He was wrong. Word quickly got back to Ricky. Ricky gave him a pretty good beating and said, you know, where's my angel dust? He had 5 bags of it. He said that he had smoked the other 5, but that he would get him, you know, the value of it, the $50 that he owed towards it, which he did. It took him a while, but he eventually paid it back. And by late June, Gary Lauwers thought that everything was fine between he and Ricky. And Ricky definitely made it seem that way to everyone around them, too. On the night of June 19th, it was erroneously reported as June 16th, but through my investigation, I found out it was actually the 19th. Everyone got together downtown. School was ending. There's a park at the end of Main Street in Northport. There's a gazebo there, a child's playground, which was quickly taken over by the quote-unquote dirtbag teenagers in Northport. And they all just convened down there. They're smoking angel dust, dropping acid, boozing it up. And Ricky, along with 2 of his friends, Jimmy Troiano and Albert Quinones, said to Gary, hey, why don't you come up to Aztecia Woods with us and party? Now, Aztecia Woods had a long history. It was kind of like the Watchung Reservation in the De Palma case. It was this large patch of woods on the southeast corner of Northport that had a bit of a weird history to it because... And here's the thing, no one will give you a definitive answer on where these things came from, but there were structures that were in the woods. There was like a half-completed church in there. There was, I think, like a weird sort of bread oven, like old-school bread oven that was left in there. But basically, these structures that kids would hang out in. And there are 3 different stories, but they all revolve around an idea of some strange preacher coming to Northport either in the 1920s, the 1950s, or the 1970s, setting up shop, and then leaving before he finished building the church. And then, of course, all the little stoner kids in town took over the woods, and now they had a place to hang out in. You know what I mean? It beat the rain. So... there were rumors going all the way back to the 1960s that a few high school seniors at Northport High School had put a witches' coven together and they were meeting in these structures in Aztecia. But by this point in June 1984, to these kids, it was just a party spot. It was a place you could go where the cops couldn't get you because it was private property. The land was owned by New York Senator Bernard Schmidt. And it was secluded enough where you could start a fire in there and no one would really see it. You could play your boombox and no one would really hear it. So they all went up there to party. And at some point during the night, a fight broke out. Gary Lauwers was stabbed to death. And according to Ricky, Jimmy, and Albert in all of their statements when they were later arrested for this, during the course of the stabbing, Ricky Kasso made Gary Lauwers proclaim his love for Satan. He said, "Say I love you, Satan," while stabbing him. And at first, Gary, defiantly, to his credit, looked his killer in the eye and said, "No, I love my mother." Mm-hmm. And Ricky just would not, he would not let up. Say you love Satan. Say I love you, Satan. Until finally Gary said it, and he died shortly afterwards. They covered him with leaves and branches and went home, washed their bloody clothing off, and resumed life as normal. And one of the tragic things about this case is Gary Lauwers was never reported missing. He was kind of a street kid, like Kasso was. He had the word that the term that was used by the police and everyone else was this kid had run away so many times before that the parents never even thought to report him missing. And here's where now. One might say, goofy drug kids in Long Island killed themselves over drugs. It happens all the time. What's so important about that? Well, I think the thing that really shocks people about this case is for 2 weeks after the murder, Kasso and Troiano were leading almost daily tours to the body. When people would ask them, "Hey, where's Gary, man? I haven't seen Gary in a while." They would tell them straight up, "Oh, we killed him." "Oh, no way." "Oh, yeah, you want to see the body?" And he would lead these kids into his Takia Woods and show them Gary Lauwers' rotting corpse and say, "I sacrificed him to the devil." And not a single person that was shown the remains called the police or told an adult. It was a combination of this code of silence among these kids in Northport. You don't rat on your friend. And there was also this fear that Ricky might come after them, or the cops might even try to pin it on them. So no one told anyone anything until July 1st. Troiano met up with a girlfriend to go see a movie, and the girlfriend brought along a friend of hers who said, "Hey, have you seen Ricky around lately?" And Jimmy said, "Oh, yeah, he and I just killed a guy, Gary Lauwers." And just like everyone else, she thought that he was making it up until he said, "Yeah, you want to go see the body?" And she said, "No, of course not." So she went home and called Gary's mother and said, "Hey, is Gary there?" And she said, "No, we haven't seen Gary in almost 3 weeks." So that's when she called the police. It took 3 days, but the police eventually found the body. And then they found Kasso and Troiano sleeping in a car. And like you mentioned, it was a perfect package to set off the satanic panic, because not only did you have an admission from the killer that this was supposedly a satanic sacrifice, but also you had this real dirt merchant, of a kid on TV in living color with this AC/DC shirt with a picture of a demon right on the shirt, just growling at the camera. He was every paranoid suburban parent's worst fear come to life, and it was you couldn't escape it. It was on all the three major networks, CBS, ABC, and NBC. It was front page news on the Daily News and the Post every day for 10 days running. I believe the only thing that knocked it off the front page was the McDonald's shooting that year, which at the time was the largest mass shooting on American soil. So unlike the De Palma case, which went away pretty quickly, this just kept ballooning and ballooning outwards, and it really gripped the nation.
Couple of questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
Kasso was influenced by an older guy that was a Vietnam veteran. Did you look into that?
Yes. That guy had a million nicknames in town. A lot of people called him Pagan Pat. His name was Pat Toussaint. Pagan Pat, Grandpa Dirt, Old Man Pat, all these names. And by and large, what I have heard from the people who knew him was that he was a mentally disturbed Vietnam veteran. He was about 40 years old, that hung around downtown in Northport and just hung around all these teenage kids in the park. He would sell his Librium to them, which I believe is a medication that you use to calm down the DTs when you're trying to get off booze. It has a kind of an opioid effect. He was also selling a variety of other drugs, mainly prescription stuff he was getting through the VA hospital, but he was your all-around generic bad influence on these kids. And how it corresponded with Ricky is supposedly he was possibly the person that introduced Ricky Kasso to the Satanic Bible.
Right. Where is he today? Is he dead now or what? Probably, right?
Yes, he actually committed suicide in the months right after this whole thing blew up. There were a lot of conspiracy theories going around that he may have been up there that night. It was actually kind of interesting, how recollections get molded together in people's brains. I talked to a couple of Ricky's friends that were like, oh, we think that he may have actually killed Pat too, that he pushed Pat in front of the train. And then I have to kind of awkwardly remind them, it's like, well, Pat didn't die until 5 months after Ricky died. And then it's like, oh, okay. But it just shows the kind of fear, the shockwave that it left behind. It wasn't just, so much that it was this horrible murder, but the element of fear, the fear that he instilled in these people was so much so that 32, 33 years later, people are still like, well, I think he may have gotten one other person. It wasn't out of their frame of mind to suspect that. But by and large, I have heard that this guy was this, it's unfortunate. There was a large drug problem in Northport. There was a big problem with alcoholic and drug addicted veterans with the VA hospital that was built there. And unfortunately, these two forces combined. And if he did not introduce Ricky Kasso to Satanism, he fanned the flames of it.
Interesting, too, that in that time, because, I have a daughter right now who's 17 years old, And just to think how these three kids could murder somebody, come home, they had to have blood on them. Their clothing had to have blood on it. How could the parents not notice this or
It was very, very late at night. They didn't leave the woods until about 3 a.m, so they walked back to Albert Quinonez's house, and Ricky and Jimmy each took showers, and they threw out the bloody clothes in a neighbor's trash can, and Albert lent them a shirt, and they just went back downtown where kids were still hanging out and partying at 4 or 5 in the morning. Just like nothing ever happened.
Incredible.
It was nothing to these kids.
It's just such a different world back in those days. Now, Troiano and Quinonez, there's varying versions of the story where either they were holding Gary or they weren't holding Gary. And what did you come up with?
I don't think anyone will ever know what happened there that night because the two of them have told such differing stories. There were 2 separate confessions that were taken from Jimmy on the day that he was arrested. One of them he's very innocent in. The other one, not so much. Albert Quinonez, in exchange for immunity, gave the police a confession that said that Jimmy held Gary down while Ricky stabbed, but then surprised everyone during the trial by tearfully breaking down and saying, no, Jimmy didn't do it, but I ran up and kicked Gary in the face while he was being stabbed. So unfortunately, who knows at this point? Does it change the outcome? Probably not, but it's horrifying to think of. It's just the absolute callousness shown towards someone that, Ricky had known this kid since 2nd grade. The two of them were on the same Little League team together. And it all came, if you take one side of it, it all came down to $50 of drug money. And he snuffed his friend's life out. There's also the whole satanic element. Like I said, the newspapers quickly latched on to this idea of a satanic cult operating in Northport, New York. And the way that happened basically was a press release was prepared after the arrest that just whoever wrote it just took it upon themselves to say Ricky Kasso is a member of a satanic cult that performs rituals to honor the devil. Ricky Kasso did perform rituals to honor the devil. He actually went to the Amityville Horror House on Walpurgisnacht 2 months before the murder and performed a ritual outside there. But was he part of an organized cult? No. There was another issue that reinforced it where there was a group of kids that were around a few years beforehand known as the Knights of the Black Circle. The Knights of the Black Circle entered this whole mess when the police chief was giving an interview. And basically the interviewer said, well, have you had trouble like this in Northport before? And he said, well, there was a goat fetus that we found burned in the gazebo where Kasso hung out in 1981. But we later found out it was this group called Knights of the Black Circle that may have done it. So all of a sudden, the press is just like, oh, it was where Kasso hung out? Group called Knights of the Black Circle. Kasso's in the Knights of the Black Circle. So then the next day, another article runs that says Kasso is the leader of the Knights of the Black Circle, who weren't even a satanic cult. They were a group of drug dealers. But they used satanic imagery to scare competing people away. They were apparently a bunch of nerdy hippie peace freaks that were getting their butts kicked by competing dealers and having their stash stolen from them. So they figured, well, why don't we just paint some pentagrams on the back of our jackets and people will leave us alone? And boy, did they leave them alone. People were horrified of these kids. But then the tables kind of got turned on them when, just because of a total error in reporting, the Daily News and the New York Post were telling the country, these kids are the satanic cult that killed Gary Lauwers. So these guys, I don't want to be to pour them or anything, but they had to go into hiding, and the Daily News and the Post never corrected this. So this idea of Ricky Kasso being this teenage satanic cult leader just flew out into the ether, and it really stuck. Now, that's not to say that Ricky Kasso was not a Satanist. We know that he did walk around with a copy of the Satanic Bible, and a very chilling revelation that came to me recently was there was a reporter that went to Northport in the wake of this all happening by the name of David Breskin. Breskin is a very, very talented reporter who had done work for Rolling Stone in the past, and he was assigned this story, and he really integrated himself into this community of kids trying to get the true story while the daily papers were, just selling all these crazy salacious headlines, really hyping it up when it didn't really need to be. The truth was horrifying enough. But basically, Breskin gave me his tapes that he recorded, all of the 44 hours worth of interviews, and then gave me access to his notebooks. And I noticed in his notebooks that he was marking down very specific pages from the Satanic Bible, page 88, page 89. So I went and I got a copy myself for my research, and I'm flipping through it. And the interesting thing about the modern Satanic Church is a lot of it's almost compared to libertarianism these days, in the sense that it's like, no, this is about personal freedom. It's about basically getting ahead in life. A lot of this spooky stuff is stuff that's all just, thrown on us by the media. It's just basically acknowledging man as a carnal beast is one of the ways I like to call it. So when you hear that, I was honestly under the impression that, the Satanic Bible doesn't advocate sacrifice then or anything. You probably couldn't publish a book in America that advocates murder. There's probably some laws against that. But sure enough, while going through Breskin's notes, there's a reference to an entire chapter in the Satanic Bible called On the Choice of a Human Sacrifice. And in it, it makes very clear based, not instructions, but it says, to quote, the only time a Satanist would perform a human sacrifice would be if it were to serve a twofold purpose, that being to release the magician's wrath, the magician being the killer, in the throwing of a curse, and more important, to dispose of a totally obnoxious and deserving individual. Now, one of the things that we know about Ricky Kasso is he owned a copy of this book, and the other thing is I have a copy of his confession, and he ends his confession by saying Gary Lauwers was ripping off everyone in town and he got what he deserved, which, I mean, it's a bit of a leap, but it does make me wonder, is he, by ending his last recorded statement as saying, really pounding the point home, he got what he deserved. Was he making reference to this passage in this book that he had read so many times, that your human sacrifice has to be a deserving individual who had wronged you, who had caused you pain? So it really does make you wonder, if you're a 17-year-old kid living in the woods, strung out on angel dust, 50 pounds underweight with no prospects ahead of you, and you're sitting across from this kid who had wronged you, had embarrassed you, he stole from you when you really had nothing to your name. It really makes you wonder if the drugs really pounded that home, this kid's got it coming. It gave me chills reading that passage because I honestly did not know it was in there. I hadn't had time to read the Satanic Bible cover to cover yet. But sure enough, there it is, giving almost an excuse for a human sacrifice. So was Ricky Kasso the robe-wearing leader of a satanic cult on Long Island? No. But is it out of the realm of possibility that in his own mind, Ricky Kasso was sacrificing Gary Lauwers to Satan as revenge for the drug theft? I would argue definitely so.
Oh, yeah, so would I. Now, let me ask you a question. What is your faith? Do you have a faith that you follow or practice or believe in?
I guess you'd say I'm agnostic. I don't know. It's one of the things. It's like I hunt for answers for a living, but I don't have one on this. Culturally, I was raised Roman Catholic for a period of time, but now I don't know. It's for a while I was your edgy college atheist man, but now I've seen enough weird things in my life, paranormal things, things that are pretty hard to write off as coincidence, where I do have to kind of take a step back and wonder, like, is there something pulling the strings out there? So I guess I'll play it safe and say I'm agnostic.
Now, these Rolling Stone, these 44 hours of tapes you have, is any of that stuff or transcripts included in the book?
I used them as a way to, because it's incredible listening to them. They were really highly regarded as, the holy grail of this case. So much so that when Troiano went on trial, his lawyer, Eric Nyberg, who later became famous for the Amy Fisher case, the Long Island Lolita,
sure.
He subpoenaed Breskin for these tapes and lost. Like, these were very highly desired, and they were never made public. They were used to make I think it's a 7 or 8 page article in Rolling Stone. Go to David Breskin's website if you want to read something before the Acid King comes out, which is possibly the most reliable piece of reporting on this case. Go to davidbreskin.com, BRESKIN, and search for Kids in the Dark, which is the name of his article. Like I said, he spent several weeks in Northport living amongst these teenagers, collecting 44 hours interview tape, including from Quinones, a absolutely chilling description of the murder. And basically, I got him to send them to me. I digitized them. They had never been digitally preserved before. And listening to them was almost like theater of the mind, because he almost never turned the tape recorder off. And it's from beginning to end. So it's almost like hearing a radio play of him going and meeting all these people. And it was kind of, for lack of a better word, trippy to hear, because half of the people he spoke to, I spoke to before I got the tapes as 45 to 50-year-old adults. So it's like, oh, there's a young version of that guy. Wow, his voice changed. So I was able to utilize, because there was just so much on the tapes, I was able to utilize them into creating and crafting these scenes in the book. Like, nothing is invented. No dialogue is invented. But I was able to use the tapes as a way to show, like, he went here, this is who he spoke to, and this is what happened. And you really, really get a sense of what it was like to be up against the impossible in a town that did not want to talk about this. The kids were hiding. A lot of them were gag orders from lawyers and cops, and it just shows that this guy persevered and was able to get the closest thing to the true story out there in 1984.
I tell you, it's funny the way you said it a couple of times, that the Rolling Stone reporter was living amongst these teenagers. Almost like it's an African tribe, like this pygmy tribe in Africa is living amongst.
You would laugh, but you would have to hear these tapes because it is exactly like that. There is a code amongst these kids. They were wary of any reporter because, I mean, gosh, a couple of them spoke to the first wave of reporters that came, and then all of a sudden they pick up the copy the next day, and it's like, wait, I didn't say that. My words were, there's no cult here. Ricky, the leader of a cult? What are you talking about? This kid was a dirtbag living in the woods. He didn't have any money to eat. He couldn't take care of himself. He couldn't organize anything. So it was very much like that. These kids were very guarded. They stuck together. There was a code of silence. There was a code of honor among them. But he was able to, I don't want to say infiltrate because there wasn't anything nefarious behind his intentions, but he was able to go there and find these kids and gain their trust in trusting him to tell their story. And most of them to this day say, he was the only one that did a good job. He was the only one that didn't lie. He didn't put words in our mouth. And it was the closest thing out there to the truth. The book that came out in 1987, however, is a completely other story that's just, it put a bad taste in my mouth reading it.
Now, Triano and Quinones, okay, did you, because Triano is giving interviews now today. Have you talked to either of these people?
Triano is actually in jail right now on a charge for, in 2004, he held up a CVS pharmacy in Maine. He took his stepkid's bicycle and rode over to a CVS with a cap gun in his hand and forced the pharmacist to give him a whole bunch of OxyContin and, I believe, fentanyl patches. And he was busted right away in the parking lot. So he's in jail right now on that. Quinones, I did contact. Quinones refused to speak with me unless I paid him and assured him that there was a movie deal attached. So that did not happen.
Very interesting. Okay, now Quinones got a deal. He went in, he got busted right away. They brought him in and he gave a confession and he agreed to testify against the other two guys, right? Mm-hmm. Then we have Ricky commit suicide.
Yes, Ricky hung himself with a prison bed sheet only 8 or 9 hours after being transferred into the Suffolk County Jail in Riverhead. He left no suicide note, gave no indications that he was going to do it. In fact, one of the most shocking things when you really start reading deep into this case is you realize that he was interviewed right away by a prison psychologist, a guy by the name of Dr. Richard Dachau. And Dachau interviewed both Ricky and Jimmy back to back and determined that Ricky was fine. He was cool, calm, collected. He was not lashing out. His thoughts were coherent, grounded in reality. He asked to see the drug counselor because he wanted to get himself clean in jail. So he said, okay, he's fine. And then Triano, he said, oh, this guy's suicidal. Triano was in a fetal position on the bench in the holding pen, wouldn't make eye contact, was in despair, saying his life was over, his life was ruined by all this. So he ordered him to the sick bay immediately for a 24-hour suicide watch. And, I can't fault the guy because the guy was tricked. Ricky had tricked doctors before, but, they got the wrong one.
Now, were you able to talk to Triano?
No, he's in jail right now. I was not able to get a hold of him. Okay. And the people that were close to him in Northport all told me, this is not a guy you want having your address, and he's probably not going to give you the truth anyway. So I I took their word on it. But I do have access to interviews that he gave several interviews to the newspaper after the trial was over. And there is a filmed interview between him and Peter Filardi, a filmmaker who made an unreleased film in the late 1990s, early 2000s called Ricky Six. It wasn't released because I believe the story is the bank that was financing the film went under. So now the film is stuck in perpetual, like, legal limbo. Like, the entity that owns it is no longer a thing. So, but you can watch the master print of it up on YouTube. Just type in Ricky Six. I think even if you just type in Ricky Kasso, it comes up. But he had directed that, and he was also involved in a Discovery Channel documentary at the same time called Satan in the Suburbs. And during the production of that, Troiano was interviewed extensively, so I have his interviews from that documentary, in addition to a 10-minute one that he does with Peter Filardi. And it's kind of chilling. At the end of it, Filardi asks him, like, is there anything that you wish you could say to Ricky now? And he just goes, hope you said your prayers before you hung up. It's just this total nihilism towards each other that these kids had. There was really no honor among them. There was no regard for human life. It's chilling. Forget the Satan stuff. I mean, even without the Satan stuff, it's brutal. And then you realize it's like these kids were all under 18. This wasn't a ghetto where you imagine violent crime to happen all the time because of the sensational reporting of the media. This was, beautiful Northport. Hey, Jack Kerouac is from here. We're this wonderful, liberal, artsy-fartsy community, with our nice schools and our beautiful marina. And what these kids did instantly turned it into Satan Town, USA.
Now, Troiano stood trial.
Mm-hmm.
And he was found not guilty.
Yeah, Nyberg, to his credit, found an incredible defense. The way that he explained it to me when I interviewed him last year was, he goes, I met him for the first time, and he told me an incredibly believable, solid story about what happened that night. And then I met up with him again, and he told me a second, completely credible and agreeable story, but it was 100% different from the last one.
Wow.
He did this a third time. And I said, you know what? I need to get him released from the jail so I can bring him back to his Takia Woods, to the murder site, and maybe that will trigger his proper memory of what happened. The judge signed off on it and said, sure, this is important. So brought him back to the crime scene, and according to Nyberg, Jimmy gave him a fourth completely believable story, but was 100% different from the previous three. So he said, Jimmy, we got a problem here. You've told me four completely different stories. And he said, well, Mr. Nyberg, when you're on PCP and acid and the stars are shooting across the sky and the trees are changing colors, it's hard to remember what happened that night. And a light bulb went off in Nyberg's head, and he said, that's our defense. The kids had no idea what they were doing. None of the testimony is reliable. Kasso's, Troiano's, Quinonez's, none of them, because they were out of their mind on drugs. How do we know what really happened that night? How do we know who held who down? How do we know who stabbed who? And he made his case to the jury, and the jury said he's right. Especially after they watched Quinonez on the stand completely change his story, did a total 180, and they let him go. So there really was no justice for Gary Lauwers in this case.
Do you think they got to Quinonez with an offer?
Well, yeah, he was the first one they got.
No,
Ricky
not the
and
cops.
Jimmy
I mean the defense. Do you think the defense approached the Quinonez and got him to change his story?
Oh, them? No. No, I honestly think that because he had tried, Nyberg had tried to get to Quinones. That was the whole aspect of him trying to get Breskin's tapes, because when the Rolling Stone article came out in late November 1984, the trial was still in the planning stage. So Eric Nyberg picks up a copy of this article and sees Albert Quinones interviewed in it, and he's talking about how the cops beat a confession out of him, which may or not be true. The cops that were there when he was interrogated all insist, no, he was not beaten. We would tell you if he was. So, for whatever that's worth. But Nyberg is reading this and going, wait, if his confession was coerced violently out of him, there's no credibility to the witness, So he wanted to hear if there was anything else on the tapes relating to that. He was blocked at every move. I believe, I know Quinones was taken out of Northport during the this period leading up to the trial. I believe he was sent to Georgia. I can't be 100% certain, but that was the rumor on the street. So, no, he never got to him on the stand there. I honestly think that this was a kid that was also very confused about what happened that night, because these were kids that were ingesting an astronomical amount of technically dirty drugs, because what they were also taking that night, in addition to smoking marijuana that was laced with PCP, was what they were calling mesk. They thought it was mescaline. They were these little things called purple microdots that were sold on the street as mescaline, but they really weren't. They were like real bottom grade LSD cut with a little bit of PCP, and shockingly enough, with strychnine, which is, for you non-chemistry nerds out there, it's rat poison. So these kids were swallowing rat poison, PCP, and LSD, thinking it was a natural drug that's taken from a cactus plant, I believe mescaline is. And no, they were drinking. These kids were drinking Drano, as they say. So they were out of their minds on all this stuff. So I really think that that's the essence of what their peers were telling me while I was interviewing them, and they said you will not get a straight story from them. They have no reason to give you one, because they don't want to end up in jail, which they wouldn't anyway because of double jeopardy laws. But also, they've had 32 years to mold this story in their minds the way that they want to make them look good to themselves. So I wouldn't trust them.
Well, not only that too, but the story's been. There's been a lot of movies about this story. Even one of the Wahlberg brothers was in one of these movies. It was loosely based on this story.
Oh God, what was the name of it? The one that was based on the book recently, the fiction book. Yeah, I think it was done by Gillian Flynn, In a Dark Wood.
I don't know what the name was, but one of the Wahlberg brothers is in it. Mm-hmm. And it's a good movie.
There's Ricky Six, there's Black Circle Boys, there's the one that Jim Van Bebber did, My Sweet Satan, and then there was the one that Tommy Turner and I'm going to butcher this guy's last name. I think it's David Wajarnis did, called Where Evil Dwells. So this is, it's never left the pop culture consciousness.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Black Circle Boys is the one with Wahlberg in it. I was just watching. And why do you think it's so popular?
There's so many elements to it. Because like I said, even if you take the Satanism out of it, it's still horrifying. If you take the murder out of it, a group of kids being seduced by Satan is still horrifying. Then, even if you take the drugs out of it and all that stuff, it's like, well, I can excuse, someone flipping out on PCP and murdering someone. I mean, you can see that. I mean, look at all the urban legends we heard growing up about, oh, yeah, man, I knew a guy, he took PCP and he cut his face off and fed it to his dogs, man. It was crazy. So it's not out of the realm of possibilities. But then you have to account for the period of time where he came down from that high and showed no remorse for it and led tours to the body. And so much so that people think that it's River's Edge was based on this case, which it wasn't. It was based on the Conrad case a couple years later. But I think people just can't wrap their heads around it, and that's why it's immediately appealing to them. And also, like I said, it is kind of the perfect package. You have all of these really spooky circumstances of the case, and then you have accompanying it one of the most striking images in all of pop culture. You have the photograph that Tony Jerome took of Ricky Kasso walking into his arraignment, and his eyes are burning a hole into your soul. He's got the AC/DC shirt on. He's sneering at the camera. I mean, to me, it's as iconic as the photograph of Oswald holding the rifle in the communist newspapers in the backyard. It's just, I mean, that summer in 1984, you couldn't pick up a newspaper without seeing that image, and it's striking, it's shocking, it's horrifying, and it's all real.
Did you talk to any of the kids now grown up who went on that tour, or what about the Rolling Stone guy? Did he talk to any of those kids that went on the tours of the body?
Yeah, he spoke with at least two of them who are quoted in the Kids in the Dark story. I briefly spoke with one of them who was not happy to hear that this case is still being written about. He really wants the story to go away because he got his act together, so I can't fault him for that. I spoke to another guy who was the one that was brought up to the body when Ricky and Jimmy decided they wanted to bury it. And he told me an absolutely chilling story because at the time, I had not made this discovery in Breskin's notebooks about the Satanic Bible and how that may have influenced Ricky. Because everyone always says, oh, the Satanic Bible was an influence, but no one ever points to a specific passage. And this was the first time that I found something where, oh my God, yeah, this is completely advocating everything that he did, and there's a word that appears in here that also appears in the confession. So before that, I was kind of the mind that, the Satan thing was exaggerated by the media. This was just a drug thing. And I said that to this guy because, I mean, that is one of the ways that I get people to talk to me. I'm not being deceptive. I'm saying, look, I understand that the media has sensationalized this before, but I'm not trying to do that. From what I understand, this was a drug murder. This wasn't about Satan, and I just want to write the truth. And this guy told me, he said, listen, I would not discount the satanic element of this. I will tell you right now, I stood next to the body of Gary Lauwers in Aztecia Woods with Ricky and Jimmy, and they both looked at me and said, Gary is in hell now because we made him say he loved Satan before he died. And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It wasn't enough to take this kid's life away from him. They had to send him to hell too.
Amazing. Now, did Ricky tell... Because in these movies, and almost in every movie, they say that Ricky told Triano he was going to kill himself there in prison. What did you find out about that?
According to the jailhouse psychologist that spoke to both of them, he said after the suicide, he went and asked Jimmy, did he tell you he was going to do this? And Jimmy allegedly told him, yeah, he said he might do it if it looked like the trial was going to go on long, but I didn't think he was going to do it this quick. You talk to his other friends on the street, and they will tell you since this kid was in middle school that he was saying, if I ever end up in jail, I'm going to kill myself. Now, however much of that is hindsight being 20/20, of course, we'll never know. But it is something that I've heard from over a dozen people that supposedly this kid knew from a very young age that he was possibly heading down the wrong path, and that if he ever did something that would land him with serious jail time, he was going to take the easy way out.
Just imagine, living your life that way, with that kind of concept in your mind, you have a suicide plan in your head because, you have a plan that you're going to wind up in prison somehow. Just a life, several 17-year-old lives, just down the drain. Now, we only got about 5 minutes left. Are there any questions you think I've forgotten to ask you that are important for this?
No, I think we've really covered the gamut here without giving too much of the book away, and it was really good to talk about this, because like I said, I'm very close to handing in the manuscript, and it just shows people I think have this idea that, and for all I know, maybe some true crime writers do write this way, but people kind of have this idea that when you're working on a case that's already finished. It's over and done with. It was 32 years ago, 33, I think, this year. That you do your research, and then there's a fine line where the research is over, and then you go away and write your book. When, for me at least, it's a there's a million moving pieces in this thing. The investigation, the research is constantly going, and here I am. I'm 3 weeks away from handing in The Acid King to Simon & Schuster. And this week I found the passage in the Satanic Bible that may have not told Ricky to do this, but justified the idea in his drug-addled mind. So it just goes to show that, I mean, you could be right up against your deadline and you can make these discoveries. And it was a pleasure to actually discuss this with you, because I like to keep the readers informed. It's when I'm waiting for one of my favorite authors to put out a book, it's like, I want updates. I want to know, when can I get it? What you doing? How's the investigation? And I like to keep my readers informed with that, because it's kind of like we're all going through this together. This is it's a very strange journey. I've been very, very lucky to do what I've done. Like I said, to have this community of Weird New Jersey behind me, working with me, helping me out with things. It's just been incredible. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I have the best readers and the best friends in the world. And it's always a pleasure coming on shows like yours and just telling people, like, hey, this is what's going on, and you're going to get to read it soon.
And this book is going to be called The Acid King, and it's going to be available on Amazon when?
Somewhere within the next year. I'll have a firm date once it's handed in and it's edited, but if you want updates on when that date is coming, you can follow me on Twitter at @JPollackAuthor. That's JPOLLACK author. And just keep Googling The Acid King, Ricky Kasso. I'm going to be doing press on this leading up to it, keeping everyone posted, because I know this is a case that, you grew up with it. You know all about it. And I think a lot of people, because the public was largely duped. Like, I won't go too much into it, but in 1987, there was a paperback book that came out called Say You Love Satan.
Right.
And Say You Love Satan upset a lot of people who were around back then, because literally this author, David St. Clair, all he did was read a couple newspaper articles and literally made the rest up. Like, it's invented. And he plagiarized the Rolling Stone article in it, a couple of the Newsday articles. And let's face it, in an era before Google and instant fact-checking, if you didn't live on Long Island at the time, you picked up this book and read this, you thought that was how it happened. It's like, well, it's a book. It's got to be true. So I think now that more and more people are able to go on the internet and find out, like, oh, wow, that book that I bought and I read wasn't true. Like, I really want to, leave the door open to people to know, like, this is how I'm writing this book. This is how the research and the investigation is going. And soon it'll all be out there for everyone to know that this is the true story of what happened with Ricky Kasso in Northport. And the truth is literally stranger than fiction. Like, I don't see why anyone would make anything up with this story, because the story's horrifying.
And where can people find your podcast again?
Well, the Devil's Teeth podcast, you can find that. You can search for it on Google, just Devil's Teeth podcast. There's a Twitter account that I run with it. It's at Devil's Teeth Pod, Pod. And if you want some more of the kind of lighthearted side of conspiracy theories, UFO sightings, Bigfoot, a little bit of true crime, with a satirical edge, I'm lucky enough to co-host a podcast with my best friends in the world. It's called Podcast 1289-1289. You can follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, and don't forget Weird New Jersey, too. He writes for Weird New Jersey.
Yes, weirdnewjersey.com. Also on Twitter and Facebook.
Jesse Pollack, thank you so much, my friend.
Ed, thank you for having me.
Keep in touch, okay? Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. That was weird.
All clear, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Send me a blurb, Ed.
You got it.
All right, man.
Okay, that's super weird. I had actually hung up on that. Okay. I'm exhausted. Let's see. Okay, there you had Jesse Pollack. The book is called The Acid King. And I forget the name of the first book. I'm exhausted. I got pulled over by the cops like 15 minutes before I was doing the show. So that's why I was kind of rushed in here and a little distracted. Let's see. Coming up next week on Saturday, we have Michelle Stevens, Dr. Michelle Stevens. She was just on Dr. Phil there. She has a fascinating story about when she was brought up in a dog cage, basically from the age of 8, and raped and molested by this creep of a stepfather. Fascinating story there. Her mother just met this guy, and the guy said, "Hey, let me take your daughter to my house for the weekend." The mother said, "Okay," and that was pretty much the end of her innocence. A lot of stuff coming up tomorrow. I'm taping with this big story. I don't want to mention the names, but it involves MK Ultra and a woman who was assassinated, and I have her boyfriend coming on the show. We're going to get to the bottom of that. A lot of stuff going on. And taping a show Monday about a girl here in Las Vegas who died in a hospital because she didn't have the right kind of medical insurance. She didn't receive the kind of treatment that she needed. A lot of updates and stuff going on in OppermanReport.com. That's our members section where you can go and find new content, additional content, all kind of great stuff you won't hear live on Friday nights. You won't hear it live on Saturday nights. You have to log in to OppermanReport.com, sign up, become a member. And that's how you get that content. Only exclusive. It's the only way to get it. Don't forget our sponsors, pscoco.com and emailrevealer.com and all good old Subash Technosis. Don't forget SubashTechnosis.com. I haven't mentioned them in a while. Our sponsorship with them is a little more casual. But if you need any kind of search engine optimization or a website design or outsourcing, any kind of fun stuff like that, SubashTechnosis.com. They can handle all your needs there. Any kind you need thing there. I need done on the internet. Okay, guys. I want to thank you so much. I have nothing left to say. Let me just start the next show. Next show will be coming up is a repeat of William Ramsey from last week. And then Doug Campbell with the Dallas Action coming on 1 hour after that. Will be all live, brand new content. So stay tuned over here on Awake Radio and People's Internet Radio and PSN Radio. And I think a couple of those other guys, too, play us as well. Okay, let me find a nice show here from, there we go. William Ramsey.